In the last video, I spoke about some of the people involved in making different docu-series, documentaries, and movies having to do with the freedom movement, and I'm going to be continuing that avenue in this video. So in the last one, I spoke about Chronicle Brothers Inc., which made Trucking for Freedom, and the two directors of Chronicle Brothers Inc. are Andrew Peloso and Jeremy Regato. I did speak a whole lot more about Andrew Peloso than I did speak about Andrew. I did speak more about Andrew Peloso more than I spoke about Jeremy Regato in the previous video, and I mentioned that Andrew Peloso has his own production company called Vec Labs, and they have contracts with various various clients such as the Alberta government, different energy companies, and as well marketing firms and the like, and different companies that want to bring out different products. So interestingly enough, the two organizations here that I spoke about very briefly were The Gathering and Cult, which I will get to momentarily. But first, to read a very brief description about Jeremy Regato. It says he spent his entire career developing creative solutions in the tech, media, and marketing industry. Prior to directing Trucking for Freedom, Jeremy's adventurous spirit has taken him all over the world, working with colleagues in the film industry to tell new and engaging stories. Okay, so this is Jeremy Regato's LinkedIn here, and we'll be looking at his background. So, describes him as an alpinist adventurer, photographer, cinematographer, entrepreneur, brand consultant, and he works for labeled agency, Roto Image, Delve, and works in business development at the Gathering Summit. So we'll cover what all these things are. Explorer and technology entrepreneur with a lifetime commitment to technology, engineering, and exploration. Experience includes general management of small to mid-size organizations, corporate development, product invention, engineering, development, business marketing, sales operations, and strategy. So this is labeled, which is essentially a company that helps market different brands, essentially. And then you have Delve. It says here Delve offers digital membership to a robust community of leaders in the psychedelic and Web3 space. Access a wealth of utility through our knowledge base and receive discounts on exclusive events and products offered by our partners. So some brief terminology here. Web 1 essentially refers to the first incarnation of the internet, Web 2 second, and Web 3 the third. So the first is kind of like blogs and articles and such like that, and then the second, Web 2, is kind of like being able to upload content onto things like YouTube and having social media, and there being a more interactive sense of people putting their creativity or their input onto a website of sorts. So social media is a perfect example of that. And then Web 3 is something more integrated with blockchain, which is sort of what's being developed and being pushed onto the internet a little bit. So, and then Roto Image here is another digital marketing firm, and they make 3D or 360 degree intelligent photography. So basically they just make images of products that people are selling and allow it to view it from different angles in a full 360 degree photo, if you will. So I think digital image is probably the better word. And then Gratisites, he's known as a marketing director here, and it's a digital marketing firm. And then a founding partner here of Representation Media Inc., which deals with social media management, web design, photography, and videography services. So sounds like basically a background in marketing and different forms of consulting revolving around marketing, and as well some digital and graphic design skills. so I never really went over the cult gathering, if you will. It says more than a summit or conference. The gathering is an annual coming together of courageous brand leaders eager to improve how their businesses engage with customers, prospects, or staff. So this is kind of like sort of, I guess it didn't really describe it as a conference, but I'm still going to use that term, where essentially different CEOs, VPs, brand leaders, different marketing specialists and such like that get together and discuss different ideas on a bigger kind of platform, if you will, and tickets are very expensive for the Gathering Summit, and there's all kinds of different packages that revolve around different activities and such like that that go on there, which the descriptions are a little bit vague. I'll let you guys do the searching yourself, but some of the people that have, there are some of the companies that have been there in general have been like Spotify, Airbnb, Amazon, Marvel, Netflix, Barbie, whatever, like very big name brands, and then we can see as well that Tony Hawk himself has appeared. So the reason why I'm bringing up this organization, Cult, and also I brought up the Gathering. So the reason why I'm bringing these up, for one thing, Cult is a marketing agency, and the founders of the Gathering put together this particular organization. And it's interesting because Jeremy Regato seems to work for the Gathering, and then Andrew Peloso with his company Vec Labs seem to have taken on Cult and the Gathering as clients as well. So there's a nice little circle there. And as well, just this little brief bit here, I just want to show you as well that Jeremy Regato as well can climb mountains apparently. So I guess he's into some sort of extreme sports and that sort of a thing as well. And this video was, well, interesting to watch, to say the least. I didn't really learn a whole lot from it other than very briefly, you know, at the beginning. The thing is, it was just kind of odd because it says here basically the host, which is to the far left, and then you have Jeremy Regato and Andrew Peloso over here to the far right. It says here, so the host says the convoy had trouble being organized because it was so grassroots, is what he says, and he said it was portrayed as a conspiracy against the government. And Jeremy remarks that that's incredibly accurate. So they're just kind of, it seems like Andrew and Jeremy are pushing the narrative of the truck convoy being something supposedly grassroots, and they didn't know who the organizers were because of how grassroots it was. But the reality is, you probably should know something like that if something is so incredibly grassroots. And with the amount of people that were just involved as a whole, whether we're talking about people in leadership positions or just the everyday trucker on the ground, if you will, it would be very difficult to tell who the organizers are with something so large in number. However, something so large in number, you gotta question, how can something like that just be truly organic, and how can something like that just be kind of put together on the fly almost? And Jeremy says he spoke with organizers and was unsure who the organizers are because of how, you know, incredibly grassroots it was. And yeah, I've never heard somebody use the term grassroots so many times within the span of like a minute or two, which is also something that sort of set me off here. And apparently as well, he mentioned that he had a team in Calgary sorting all the footage that they were receiving because they were given all kinds of footage through different followers of the convoy and that kind of a thing. So it took a lot of effort to organize that and put together all the pieces of video and edit it finally and that sort of a thing. Now, as well too, for any sort of truly grassroots organization or cause, the thing is, finding out who the organizers are should not necessarily be a difficult task. And the fact that this was a difficult task kind of puts together a sort of red flag, if you will, because, you know, who the organizers were was open to debate when you look at people on the ground, from like Tamara Leach to Pat King, Danny Bulford, or even Tom Marazzo, which, with Tom Marazzo and Bridget Belton and stuff like that, those are some of the people I didn't really talk about in my truck convoy videos, being that I was covering it while it was going on. It was very hard to follow as things were changing really by the hour, by the minute, really. So yeah, this video was, I guess you could say, interesting to say the least. I didn't really learn a whole lot from that. I mean, other than the fact is that either the directors are very naive or they're just BSing all the way through. So this particular title right here, here's what it translates to. It translates to, I can't say the first word, but DVOC 19, Testify to Break the Silence. And it's directed by Samuel Grenier, who's like a financial advisor of sorts. I covered him in my previous video, and he's tied with Erica Duhaime, which is a Conservative Party leader in Quebec, who also is tied to NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. He had gone with NED in Iraq, essentially. And the National Endowment for Democracy, I can leave a link for in the video to explain what it is, as I had done a video on it a long time ago. It's basically a legal wing of the CIA that was set up in 1983 during the Reagan administration, because the CIA got caught with one too many scandals. So therefore they have a legal arm, if you will, to take the blame and do some of the on-the-ground coordination, if you will. So with this particular movie here, I never really looked at who the editors were, and some of the cast here we could see, like Christine Anderson, for instance, and then various people who are quite popular in Quebec. And you see Maxime Bernier's name, Jeff Bennett, and several others in some archive footage of like Tucker Carlson. You see Daniel Bulford's name there, and Sebastian Desautels, who we will speak about. But first, I just want to say this particular editor here, Johan Godme, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I wasn't able to really find very much out about him, other than the fact is that, you know, he's an editor for the particular film I looked at. And as well, the other editor is Sebastian Desautels, who I think as well has appeared in different talk shows or podcasts and that sort of a thing as well. So to go over him very briefly, he's part of Parti Libre Canada, which means Free Party Canada, and they are a obscure federal party in Canada, and the founder of the political party, his name is Michel Leclerc, and he's definitely come off as very strange to a lot of people. You know, he's called out the moon landing for its BS, and he also claims to have astronaut training, so I don't know if he's just lying or joking or what the guy's deal is, but I just think it's, of course, worth the mention here for the connection that Samuel has, being that Samuel is involved in a political party, and with politics you just kind of keep a sort of system in place that wasn't really built for us to begin with, so I don't see how politics is really a solution to dealing with a New World Order or Agenda 2030 or any of that. So a little bit about the party platform. Here are the 4 themes which we propose to meet all in order to form a Canadian/global government of united and benevolent humans. Restore a healthy, harmonized, and balanced level of social climate while respecting all life. Immediately request the suspension of the experimental for the entire population. Urgently demand an independent and public national survey on the management of this thing. I guess you have the National Citizens Inquiry for that, although that's just another piece of theater. Immediately start the process of establishing a direct democracy. So, all in all, like I've said, politics is not the solution toward dealing with the New World Order, and all you're doing is keeping a system in place that wasn't ever built for us. And while 2 and 3, points 2 and 3 sound good at face value, you can't hope to combat some sort of public policy, especially if the norm from the professional and medical standpoint is that this is supposed to be safe, then good luck going against the medical establishment and other politicians that favor the sort of tyrannical processes, if you will, or even just favor the experimental, coercive thing to take. Sorry again for the awkward choice of words. I just don't want this video taken off of YouTube. So, this is FDDLP. I will go over the acronym momentarily. However, first I just want to say, so for one thing, it translates to Foundation for the Defense of the Rights and Freedoms of the People, and some various cast members that we can see here, such as Stephen Blaise, Dominica Desjardins, Julie Levesque, Richard Gerges, Stephanie Pepin, Lily Monnier, Petit Albert, Christine Anderson, and various others. Jeff Bennett again, Maxime Bernier we see again, Glorianne Blaise, and various others in which I've probably covered as well, like Sebastian DeSoto, and so on and so forth. Amanda Forbes, Rainer Fulmich, Samuel Grenier once again, Randy Hillier, and various others. I could keep this going on, but I'm not going to bore you, as links are in the description. You could just take a look at the cast list yourself. So, to read some of the description of FDDLP in and of itself. So there's the legal aspect. They contest before the courts the validity of legislative instruments which authorize the state, its agents, and its agents to infringe the rights and freedoms of individuals, as well as measure deemed exaggerated and illegitimate in democratic societies such as Quebec and Canada. These disputes materialize through the grants that the Foundation gives to the lawyers of the complainants, or through the hiring of experts who produce the expert reports necessary in support of legal causes. So any sort of district attorney, judge, or lawyer are all swearing their oath to the bar, and they don't work for us, just like how police don't actually work for we the people. It's the same idea as banking on politics, really, to save you when you're trusting the Bar Association. So, and then mobilization, plan, organize, and materialize peaceful mobilization activities that allow people to come together in large numbers to demand an end to health measures and to promote cohesion and unity movement for the defense of the rights and freedom of the people. Plan, organize, and concretize the publication of text, live, and recorded videos which aim to give a complete and substantiated portrait of the injustices which afflict the population in the legal spheres, political, and economic of our communities. Okay, again, sounds great at face value and all, but again, through politics or through legal means, aka the Bar Association, you're not asking for a real solution. And there are various committees attached to this organization, such as a financing committee, a cryptocurrencies committee, again, the blockchain or the ball and chain, if you will. It's kind of funny how the blockchain systems are always attached to digital identity companies. So it's almost like they want to use this so-called decentralized platform in order to keep something private, yet the blockchain's like a giant ledger system where everything is recorded. I don't know how to delete anything off the blockchain, or if there are expert programmers that do. That's kind of out of my depth right there. However, I will say I don't think it's a system that is built for we the people and is currently not being used for we the people in an appropriate manner if it could be. So then you have a long-term investment committee as well, a scientific committee, legal, events, journalistic, political, and strategic watts, communications and media, self-sufficiency, information technology, and follow-up committee of the Open Ambassadors Forums and Alternative Health Committee. So, yeah, they cover a lot of different ground, which is great, I guess. However, we're going to see what they're tied to and that kind of a thing eventually, but first I want to go over the background of some of these people here. So, he used to be part of, Stephen Blaise, the founder of this particular organization, used to be a chartered professional accountant and had his own firm from September 2003 to March 2021. And in 2013, he became an activist in the field by being a candidate for the mayor of Lévis. In 2014, he founded the Quebec Integrity Movement, and he would then give a series of conferences on the need to understand the negative influence of the banking system and tax havens on democracy and public finances, and the need to establish a true democracy in Quebec thanks to the referendums of popular initiatives. And in January 2018, he became head of Citizens of Pour Favor de Quebec. Following an in-depth reshuffle of the party, it will be able, in less than 3 months, to represent 56 candidates in the 2018 general elections. And the 2018 election will have brought together among these things several figures now known as leaders of resistance in the context of the health crisis. And among these figures are Alexis Cossette-Trudel, Danielle Pilon, Daniel Saint-Hilaire, Stéphane Levesque, and Régine Couture. So Daniel Saint-Hilaire is a former athlete and a coach right here. Michael Amont, interestingly enough, there isn't anything else written here besides what you see. And then Ghislaine Renaud, she has a background in graphic communication and event planning. And then we have a so-called independent journalist here. Before going to teach English in China in 2015, she worked 6 years as a journalist for the Center for Research on Globalization, an independent media founded by Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Ottawa, Michael Trzaskowski. So, and then Lily Monnier, who has a background as a sort of communication specialist of sorts. So, interestingly enough, on IMDb, in terms of the cast list, other than Michael Amont, who didn't have a picture, now these are the professionals that work within this organization, FDDLP. So besides Michael Amont, you see Dr. William Code and then Chris Schaefer are the only ones that do not have a page on IMDb from what I could find. And interestingly enough, with Julie Levesque, who's the journalist here, it mentions Michael Trzaskowski. He does have a page on IMDb as well. So, moving forward, it says here, July 20th, deposit by Rocco Galati of a lawsuit against Radio Canada, CBC, in connection with the single speech within the framework of this thing I can't say. FDDLP paid 100% of the lawyer's fees for VCC. Interesting, okay. So they were involved in the financing of legal fees behind Rocco Galati. And the thing is, Rocco Galati hasn't exactly done a whole lot for We the People. I'm going to cover his background as a whole, but he has a lot of cases that are sitting, and there is progress yet to be made, and this is basically the next generation of QAnon is through lawyers and trusting them and trusting the plan, and I've already spoken about the Bar Association. But now I'm going to talk about Rocco Galati's background in particular, because it's definitely an interesting one here. So, it says here he represented Abdurrahman Kadir in 2003, a suspected terrorist who was brought back to Canada. Kadir claimed to be a CIA informant, making his representation by Galati very odd. After all, this was a lawyer who prided himself on working against the government, as Rocco has boasted. And another noteworthy client was Delmart Vreeland, supposedly a naval intelligence officer. He was arrested in 2000, and he claimed to have information about upcoming attacks that needed to be prevented. And I believe that Delmart Vreeland was actually on InfoWars, and eventually, it was in 2002, he was on InfoWars after 9/11 had occurred. And he ended up speaking about something having to do with information relating to the plane or the pilots and that sort of a thing. Yet when you look at the footage of 9/11, there was no plane. That was just sort of pasted on while the towers were brought down in an internal manner, and there was thermite found at the scene. And it's my understanding that the towers kind of collapsed on themselves because there was likely bombs placed on structural weak points, and the towers collapsed on themselves. And I'm pretty sure it was not much different for Building 7. So then you have Comer as well, and then you have the citizenship for convicted terrorists and traitors. So this one is interesting because it says here, June 25th, 2014, Galati and Manuel Azevedo sued the Governor General of Canada, the Attorney General of Canada, and the Immigration Minister, and this was to stop Bill C-24, which would have stripped the dual nationals of their Canadian citizenship if they were convicted of terrorism or treason. And this has nothing to do with guilt or innocence, but letting monsters enjoy rights they don't deserve. I'm in agreement, Canuck Law. And by the way, this article, and then another one as well, I'll leave links for in the description, but this and then the other article I can't think of the title of offhand are pretty much the best articles having to do with Rocco Galati on the internet to date. So it says curiously here that Galati and Azevedo tried to use their own dual citizenships, Italian and Portuguese respectively, in order to gain private interest standing, and on January 22nd, 2015, the application was dismissed by the federal court. And so as well, it says another one of, after Trudeau took office in late 2015, Bill C-6 was one of the first pieces of legislation introduced, and after hearings began in April 2016, the bill passed, making the appeal moot, and it was formally discontinued in September 2018. And another one of Rocco's clients in 2006 was Ahmed Mustafa Ghani, who was allegedly one of the Toronto 18 suspects, a group of terrorists supposedly here. Charges against him were eventually stayed, and the ringleader, Zakaria Amara, was scheduled to have his Canadian citizenship stripped away following his conviction and life sentence. However, being that Galati and Azevedo challenged Bill C-24, that is not going to happen. So, Yeah, and then as well you see the Boyle and Kadar families, and you can see Patrick Boyle over here, definitely quite close to Justin Trudeau, which is really interesting. We're going to get to that. So it says in 2003, Galati worked to secure the release of Abdurrahman Kadar, which is the older brother of Omar Kadar. He was being held on suspicion of terrorism, and supposedly he implored the public earlier this week to not judge him since he did not face any charges while in American custody for the past 2 years. But at the same press conference, Kadar later admitted that in summer of 1998, he attended a notorious training camp in Afghanistan, which Osama bin Laden is rumored to have visited. And it says here, this is not to imply that Galati is involved in terrorism, but again, it's certainly unusual for a tax lawyer to take this path. Definitely agree. Of all the areas of law that are out there, why is a person drawn to terrorism cases? However, there would later be new ties to the Kadar family revealed. So, if your wife is pregnant, taking her backpacking through a war zone in Afghanistan isn't really the best idea, but that's what Joshua Boyle supposedly did. Allegedly, they were kidnapped in 2012 and held prisoner for 5 years, and they had 3 children in the meantime, which make their captors, in air quotes there, some of the nicest people imaginable. Definitely a far-fetched story for sure. And it says that photos were posted on December 19th, 2017 of a meeting between Trudeau and the Boyles. Now, people can't just get in to see the Prime Minister, as they would have to be cleared by the RCMP. Interesting that Trudeau didn't see him as a threat, and it's interesting to have a Twitter account with the name Boyles vs. World. And Boyles used to be married to Zainab Kadar, making him the former brother-in-law of Omar Kadar. Interesting to see how that circle works. This is the convicted terrorist who attacked the American army and was captured in 2002 in Afghanistan. And Kadar became a multimillionaire as a result of a lawsuit years later. Trudeau handed over $10.5 million of taxpayer money without putting up any real resistance. And Boyle was later charged with 19 offenses that included assault, forcible confinement, and other things. And he was, of course, acquitted by the judge. And a bit aside, Patrick Boyle's father was a connected judge with the federal court in the tax department, and Galati got his start in law working with the government as a tax lawyer. Well, that's probably a coincidence. Yeah, it's really interesting to say how Rocco Galati got his start working as a tax lawyer, and then Patrick Boyle's father happens to be a well-connected judge in the federal court working within the tax department. It's interesting to see Rocco Galati then have to assist Patrick Boyle there then. So now there are various things we could talk about with Rocco Galati in particular. However, I'm just kind of nitpicking some of the things that I think are the most relevant to today for people to know. And again, this article will be in the description for people to check out themselves. So, private defamation gets Galati's attention, but these don't. It's been addressed repeatedly on this site how 2 claims by VCC remain in limbo. One is from October 2019 and involves the coercive measure of Ontario students. Sorry again for the awkward choice of words. And another is the infamous one from July 2020, which would end all measures completely. Supposedly a group from Called Action for Canada will be filing a lawsuit in BC even after fundraising for a year. I am not sure about the status of that particular lawsuit offhand, if that is one that has been filed or what the deal is there exactly. And it says, there have been rumors circulating that all these affidavits ready to drop on Trudeau and his cronies, and it's all coming together. Thousands of pages of evidence is about to be submitted, and the courts will fix it all. Basically, trust the plan. Like I said, it's like the Bar Association incarnation of QAnon. Diligently push a case that impacts nothing long term and let potentially groundbreaking cases remain idle. Yes, exactly what is happening. And the defendants in the July 6, 2020 case, excluding the Windsor Essex country and their CMOH, haven't even bothered to lawyer up, and no attempt was made to force a default judgment. A cynic may wonder if there was collusion involved, an agreement by all parties to do nothing. The statement of claim was written up in such a piss poor manner, and maybe that was deliberate, that it would be struck by any challenge filed. Considering that the claim alleges serious human rights violations, it seems odd to be worth only 11 million, which is far less than a defamation case. So yeah, all in all, in particular, and the last thing I want to say is CEWS, which is an emergency wage subsidy having to do with DVOC 19, and I can only say it like that. I apologize once again. So, yeah, of course, Rocco Galati took money relating to that, and the thing is, in particular, like, again, not only is the Bar Association something that isn't working for us, but it's quite evident that Rocco Galati in and of himself is definitely playing a sort of game with we the people, and this is not uncommon for these sort of organizations to do, and these organizations are just different elements on the world stage in order to distract us and deviate us from really finding either solutions or surviving in and of itself. And the fact of the matter is that the narrative is always controlled on both sides, and so we need to use our sense of discernment, especially when viewing something that might immediately seem to speak out to us or speak to us, because there's always a sort of psyop, if you will, planned for everybody of every sort of bias or leaning, whether it be somebody who doesn't agree with any sort of aspect of the system. You have the people like Christopher James or Dallas Hills, Kevin Annett, and those sorts. And then for the legal solutions, if you will, you have different lawyers. You have Rocco Galati, the JCCF, and different sorts of politicians as well involved, like Randy Hillier and Maxime Bernier and the sort. And of course, working within the system is not the answer, but again, they have a psyop sort of plan for every single type of individual or any sort of thought process, if you will, they have an operative for. So just always bear that in mind when looking at something, that not all is always as it will appear to be at face value, and that there's generally a much deeper image, a much bigger agenda at play. So all in all, use your own discernment and feel free to ask me what you like, comment on the video, etc., that sort of a thing. But I'm always pretty easily reachable, and anybody can feel free to speak to me. And yeah, I appreciate the watch, the subscribe, and all that. So take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching.